Aram, thank you for joining. I'm really excited about this conversation. You are a professional artist. You draw dinosaurs, so I want to talk about this. You're also from Armenia. I've met you in Armenia, and it's great to have you for this conversation. I have a lot of students that are really interested in dinosaurs. So thanks for joining our conversation today.
Absolutely, Daniel. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very honored. It's a great privilege to be given such a platform, and I'm happy to discuss everything regarding these extinct animals. They've been a very passionate subject matter of mine ever since I was a child. And now to have them be the main subject matter of my vocation, that's also, well, quite tremendous. So to be able to share that, especially with children, that's a wonderful endeavor. So thanks very much for assisting in that regard.
Well, pleasure is mine. So, how did you get interested in drawing and, in particular, dinosaurs?
Right. So what happened was when I was growing up, well, I was born in 1995 in Yerevan, capital of Armenia. When it comes to drawing, I'd say, well, I mean, every kid just picks up a pencil every now and then. That always happens. But what kept me going was that my grandfather was an architect. He was actually the main architect for almost a decade of Yerevan, and he was always so encouraging in every way. And I could have drawn like the most simplistic things ever, but he was very encouraging and very supportive, and also very enthusiastic about me picking up drawing, even just as a hobby. Um, so that was definitely something that it's incredibly important to have children hear those types of words and those words of encouragement, no matter what they're doing, even if it's not at a professional level. It can't be, of course, at that age, but when you encourage them and you give them support, that's always bound to pay off in the end. So I can definitely attest to that because that's happened in my life. So that's how I kept drawing continuously. However, when it comes to the subject matter, that's a different story, because since I was born in 1995, at this time, well, for example, Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park film came out in 1993, and it was still a period where all the dinosaur craze was still in effect. Um, However, this was a time period where the animals were starting to be portrayed as much more active, warm-blooded, um, fast-moving creatures compared to the ways they were being portrayed as back in the 60s and 70s, even in the 80s, when they were portrayed as lumbering, cumbersome giants with tail-dragging lizards, basically. And according to our modern knowledge, that wasn't the case. So uh, all these types of contents were coming out at this time, and they naturally had a massive impact on me. However, compared to my compatriots who were in the same age group, I had access to this type of content while they did not, because it was still post-Soviet Armenia. So it was uh, not many people actually watched that stuff. But in my case, I mean, we had a VHS, and also some of our relatives would record stuff on their videotapes, and that's how I had access to that stuff. And it had a massive influence on my imagination and on the development of my inner world. And that's how, since I was so infatuated with the subject, I wanted to hand that over to the piece of paper all the time. So that's how it became a hobby. And then eventually, when I finished school, I went to the Academy of Fine Arts and the graphical illustration faculty. Um, then, after that, I had no idea that you could actually have it be a real vocation. I mean, I knew there were paleo artists, there were professional paleo artists in the US or in the West as a whole, but I could never imagine doing that while being in Armenia. And also, of course, there's various stigma surrounding that type of vocation because a lot of people say that you're not going to make any proper money with it. However, due to the opportunities given by the internet, and since we have the type of technology that we do, it was possible for me to reach audiences with my work, and that's how. And since I always continued to do it, drawing that is, I started to garner attention, and people liked it. I always received positive feedback, even though, like, when I compare my previous works, like back in 2015, 2016, they at the moment, well, according to my own honest, objective judgment, I'd say, they're nothing compared to how I do them now, and it's all based on, of course, experience. But at that time, I had no idea that it would be possible. So, but then since I started to see the very positive feedback, that gave me the assurance that I could actually pick this up as a real job. So that's how it happened.
That's fascinating. What kind of dinosaurs do you draw?
Right. So, uh, in if you were to look at my portfolio, the types of dinosaurs that I usually draw, uh, although I do try to add as many different species to my portfolio as I can, but the usual ones are large theropods. So the two-legged large predators of the group Dinosauria. So that would, of course, be that would entail the groups Tyrannosauridae, so the large tyrannosaurs, and also Carcharodontosaurids, which are called that way because in Latin carcar means shark, and Carcharodontid means the ones that have shark-like teeth. So tyrannosaur teeth are like, these sort of curved, very long, elongated. They have that kind of form. But Carcharodontosaurus, which would entail Carcharodontosaurus, Acrocanthosaurus, Giganotosaurus, etc. These were large predators. But then, of course, you would have in another group the Tyrannosaurids, which were very successful predators. I also draw those, and also I sometimes draw Maniraptorans, so the raptors, Velociraptor, Utahraptor, Deinonychus, etc. But I have to say, I mean, probably herbivores don't have as much of a spot in my portfolio, but I absolutely love drawing ceratopsians, and ceratopsians are the ones that have the parrot-like beaks and the large crests and the very impressive keratin structures. So that would, of course, have Triceratops, the most prominent species of them all, and then Centrosaurus, Styracosaurus, and also tiny ones like Psittacosaurus. So there's many of them, many species like that, and they are very fun to draw for me as well.
You
So
seem to
yeah, those are the
understand.
prominent ones. Yeah.
That's amazing. You seem to understand what you're drawing. You're bringing up their
Yep.
technical, scientific names,
Hmm.
and that's very interesting to me. What mediums do you use to draw these dinosaurs, Aram?
So yeah, so the main mediums now, of course, for me, it doesn't get as good as going with traditional. So what I usually do is, of course, but this is what the process entails. I have the base sketch with my pencils. I draw the base sketch, and then eventually I add ink. So that can be with different types of pens that I use. So for example, I have this, which is the regular ballpoint pen, and I love using this one because it gives me the possibility to draw absolutely everything with this, and you can use various types of techniques just with this pen. But there's also different ones which basically have the same kind of saturation when you draw with them, and it's these ones which are the Pigma pens. And with these, I also tend to use markers when I'm, for example, I need to shade or give some lighting layers. Then I use Faber-Castell markers, for example, or Copic markers. They're very good for achieving shading layers. So those are the main mediums that I use, but I also combine them with digital mediums. So I scan the illustrations, I scan the drawings with my scanner, and then I add them to Photoshop, for example, and then I add new layers like color, background, trees, etc. So that's another way of doing it. But I can also draw digitally from scratch as well. So I try to combine all sorts of mediums there. As far as like drawing or painting, that's not something that I got into. So my main thing was realistic drawing with either pencil, pen, those ways. So graphical drawings, I'd say.
That's very interesting. Who have you drawn dinosaurs for?
Right. So, well, first and foremost, of course, the one who gets the most enjoyment out of it is me. But as when it comes to commissions, like if I was to be commissioned by someone, clients can vary. So they can either be simply individuals who, for example, might want a cover illustration for their book or novel. They can also be people who would want to have maybe tattoos. That's completely up to them. They can also have, there can also be album covers. That's also a thing. But there's also, I have many clients who've purchased original drawings from me just to simply hang them in their room, which is, well, frankly, even to this day, it's just stupendous to me because just the fact that someone would want to purchase something that you've created with your own hands just to hang it in their wall and have a look at it once in a while, it humbles me and fills me with great joy because I never want to get used to that. I never want to get used to that feeling because it really is so soul enriching that someone would value the thing that you created to that degree. And it really means a lot. So,
Well, I'm amazed at the detail of your drawings, and we're going to make them available for viewers to see. So that it doesn't surprise me that someone would want one on their wall. I think
thank
they
you.
could be quite the focal point of a room. Um, how did you get so good? Again, they're so detailed and they look real. How did you develop your skill over time?
Uh, well, as they say, I mean, there's no shortcuts. They the drawings that I do right now, it took, I'd say, empirically speaking, they took years for me to have the kind of approach that I do right now. So at first, when I was starting out, uh, I did not know their anatomy as well. One thing that always helps is to look at other professionals and what their process is. Not to copy them in any way, no. However, when you look at how someone draws or what kinds of techniques they use and try to adopt those, that can be very helpful because that's how we learn. We look at people who have progressed and who have gone through a certain path that you're on now in order to learn from them. That's a very simple truth. So what I try to do as well is that, like, when I see how someone has achieved some kind of technique, let's say, for example, if I'm drawing an animal that has many scales, like that's those are the kinds of species that I, of course, draw. They're scaly, a lot of them. So what I try to do is I try to look at how someone would draw those types of features. And the thing is that it's also important to know that if you really want your illustrations to look that detailed, then you have to be patient. But it's actually not about forcing yourself to be that patient. It's about actually loving the process so much that you don't care about time at all. So it's at a point where it's just an automatic process. So when I draw each scale bump individually, or the various types of osteoderms that some of these creatures might have. So osteoderms, like spikes or keratin sheaths, that type of thing, like crocodiles. So large scales or even tiny ones. I always look at it this way, that no matter how much time it takes, it's always going to be worth it in the end. And just even the tiniest of details, I never want to be lazy, and I want to implement all of them. Because in the end, that's what makes the drawing the way it is in the end. So it's important to be patient, but it's way more important to love the process so much that you just want to do everything possible for it to look as realistic as it can be. Now, when it comes to realism, of course, it's debatable when it comes to this subject, because the data that we have today, I mean, as big as it is right now compared to what it was like 200 years ago, it's still very much there's a lot of speculation involved. And I'd say, just to add to this, the most fulfilling thing, probably one of the more fulfilling aspects of this, is that there is a certain degree of creativity that a paleo artist can have. And for example, like we have extant animals, right? When someone is drawing them realistically, then they need to nail their features to a T. But when it comes to dinosaurs, you have certain information that can be considered factual and empirical. Like, for example, if we're lucky enough, if we find a full fossil, which is very rare, it's a very rare occurrence, but if we were to find a whole skeleton or a mummy, then in that case, you'd have a lot to go off of. But you still have, for example, certain features that you just can't find out about, and that is, for example, color. And when you try to draw them, and you can actually implement colors of your own. Now, of course, I mean, there's still a certain level that you can go to, but if you surpass that, then you're out of the realism aspect. Like, you're not gonna draw rainbow-colored Tyrannosaurus. But if, for example, you look at certain animals that could have been related to it, or certain reptiles that we see today, that's what's so fun about it, is that God's creation is just so vast and so spectacular, is just inconceivable to the human mind. And the various things that you can use as reference from modern nature, it's just infinite. It's a bottomless pit. So what I enjoy most is that there is a certain degree of creativity that you can have. There's a certain level of liberty that the artist has, and that sort of middle ground of having this empirical evidence from the fossils and from the paleontological data, and also a little bit of creativity from your own, just makes the whole process so much more worthwhile.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you answered another question: what you enjoy most. You enjoy the creative aspect. Can you talk a little bit about what you dislike about drawing? Is there anything you dislike about the process? I'm sure there are some very challenging parts.
Dislike.
If
I
you
would have
don't,
to
if there's
think.
nothing you dislike, that's okay too. But I want to push and just curious,
Sure.
because
No, that's a good question.
you've had to put a lot of work into this over time, and
Sure. So, uh, the things that spring to mind are not related to the drawing process itself. I'd say, maybe the main aspect when it pertains to drawing itself, I'd say the one that can become annoying at times is like when you're supposed to draw something that you're not that aware of, or you're not that informed about, or something that you're not experienced in drawing. So, for example, in my case, I think I told you this when we were uh, on our tour. I'd say drawing humans uh, would is not something that I relish as much because someone as someone who is very peculiar and very detail oriented when it comes to having everything be correct and the likeness to be correct. Drawing humans is very difficult because if you compare to animals that used to exist, and we're just going off of certain information that we have dug up from the soil, compared to something that we see on a day-to-day basis that we're so used to, it's way more difficult to draw humans because we're just so much more complex. And the I'd say the way we also perceive each other as humans is just at such uh, it it's at such a deep level that just one tiny bit of detail, if we get incorrect, that just messes up the whole thing. And I'd say drawing things that are difficult and things that I'm not used to drawing is an aspect that is not that fun. And it's something that we all have to understand. Like if we're picking up art as a vocation, we always have to. And this is where patience actually is pivotal and vital. Is that we have to be patient and understand that it takes a very long process for us to gain enough experience to for certain techniques to start to be honed and perfected for us to start to get things right. Um, and academic art, for example, this is why I think it's important. Like I only went to our art university for 1 year because at that time I wanted to go to Paris to study cinema, but then eventually ended up changing my mind. But I think academic art, even though I did not progress as much at that time, I could never compare that kind of progression with the one that I had like throughout the course of 3 or 4 years when I was just drawing by myself without any teachers or anything. I can definitely say that like 80%, the at least 80, 85%, that should be generous even, 85% of the things that I've learned have all been self-taught, just from personal experience. However, I'd say that 15% has been incredibly important because the things that I learned and the things that I did not like drawing when I was in the Academy of Fine Arts, that actually gave me some kind of a foundation. And it helped me to be propelled further in my experience because once you do things that you don't like as much, then you can much more easily enjoy the things that you want to draw and you can do them even better. This is why I think so. It's sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's very vital for us to go through this kind of education because it's about doing the things that you don't enjoy as much so that you can do the things that you enjoy eventually very well. It's a it's
Very
a good
good.
general rule of thumb, I'd say.
Yeah, very interesting. Can you give a young person advice
Mhm.
who might be considering or interested in becoming a professional artist or someone who draws full time as a
Mhm.
profession? Can you give that person some advice?
Right, right. So there's actually a couple of things that I would want to pinpoint, and that is, well, first and foremost, I'd say just be patient. That's a very important aspect. That's just, but it's not just even like when you're doing it and doing it consecutively, and you're not seeing as much evident progress, still keep going. Never ever be discouraged because there are certain points in life that you have to kind of go through a threshold of some kind in order to get to a big progression. So that's the first thing that I'd say is that you just have to be patient, and it all takes a long time, but the most vital thing in that aspect is that to enjoy the process. Just be focused on enjoying the process and not so much in the results in and of themselves. Because when you keep doing it and there is a certain level of consecutiveness and consistency, then you're always going to end up there. And also play to your strengths. You don't necessarily have to draw things that you don't like or you're not that invested in emotionally to get better. That's not necessarily true either. You can pick up a niche. Now, of course, it's more advantageous for someone to be skilled in drawing various topics that you can get more work that way. However, there's also an advantage in being proficient in one specific subject matter, and then being focused on developing a market that is invested in that subject, which then can eventually help you to monetize your work. And that's what I've been doing personally. I mean, it's not that, I mean, if you compare it to many other artists, I don't have that massive of an audience. It's about, like, I'd say on average, about 15 to 16,000 people that follow me as a whole, with all platforms all together. But there are various clients and various people who keep coming back, as in they like the work so much that they have become established, devout clients. And that's also something that's you can play into. The other thing is that, well, now with, of course, since we live in the the digital age, and it gets more digital by the day, with artificial intelligence coming into play, I think it's very important to um, not disregard traditional artwork as a whole. Because since everything is becoming digitalized, it's I think in that kind of climate, original artworks and traditional pieces have the potential to gain even more value now. And this is something that I'm hopeful for. I hope to be right. I don't want to exaggerate anything or just be positive for the sake of being positive, but I suspect that that's something that would happen, because no matter what you do, even if certain people get used to the digital stuff and they prefer that, there's still going to be a very big market of people who actually value things that have been created by a human being, by a soul. Art is not art when that is not when it does not originate from a living soul. That's what art is. It cannot be art when it has not gone through, or has not been it in its inception has not come from the human soul. Because I think that's what defines art, honestly. It's not just, and also, since I don't necessarily agree with the statement that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I am of the opinion that there are objective standards, and that pertains to almost everything. And of course, there is quite a large wiggle room, I'd say. People have various tastes, of course. However, when it comes to in its inherent value or things like beauty, you can always appreciate the craftsmanship of somebody. That's 100%. However, subject matter does have massive importance, and also the fact that it has to be beautiful. It has to be enriching for the soul. And when it comes from a machine, a computer, it does not have any inherent value whatsoever. And no matter how materialistically minded people can be, that still does not change the truth. The truth is that the objective truth is that art cannot be art unless it comes from a creator who has a soul. So I think that's very important to consider, and this boils down to inherent values like this, value systems like this. And it's important to not only just focus on the technical side of things, but the moral aspect and the spiritual aspect of it, because the rest doesn't matter if we don't discuss these things first and foremost. Uh, so I hope I've been able to articulate that as best as I can. Uh, and Yeah, it's important to focus on traditional right now. Traditional, don't neglect that. Traditional pieces are very important to pick up right now, and be skilled in by simply picking up a pencil or a pen. That's where it starts. It's You can't get any better than that. It's very simple, really.
Well, thank you, Aram. That was very good. What do you hope to accomplish as an artist?
Well, that's that's a very good question, because here's the thing. Recently, during the last 2 or 1.5 year, I'd say 2 years approximately, I've been wrestling with the fact that I do not just simply want my art to bring glory to me. First and foremost, it has to bring glory to God. Uh, and what I want to do is that, at least, even if I'm not illustrating species that we have today, and we're going off of the various speculations, but the fact that we have been given a gift like this to be able to have reason and a consciousness, and since we are made in his likeness and in his image, we are able to dig up things from the soil, from the ground, and try to understand, like, the natural process of fossilization is just such a gift that it's not about just making up certain animals out of thin air. There's a lot that goes into it. And this is why I don't really necessarily understand the skepticism surrounding the field of paleontology, because there's a lot of it, especially in Christian circles, unfortunately. But it's a great gift to be able to have this kind of material, and then try to understand, like, what other types of creations there were before. And what I want to show with my art is that we can actually be thankful and grateful that, since we are made in his image and in his likeness, that we are able to create these types of things. And I want that to be reflected in my work, because it's not just about, hey, look, I drew this cool creature, look how detailed it is. That's not what matters at the end of the day, because that's what I used to think for the majority of my entrepreneurial art career. But nowadays, it's just there's a major shift, and I think that there has to be real inherent value, because, like, of course, I'm not saying that in any way, like, when you look at the greatest paintings in history, or the great masters of painting or art as a whole, the things that they used to illustrate, they just have much deeper value. Of course, they're about the human condition, and but this, however, just in its own sphere, in its own corner, let's say, is another way to hopefully uh, bring up the fact that that we have this kind of a gift, that we can try to envisage and imagine various types of animals and various types of creatures, beings that were the handiwork of the ultimate creator. And that's what I would want people to I want people to have that kind of a takeaway. So I would hope that I can be successful in that regard, because it's not about drawing as many pieces as possible and becoming this famous dinosaur artist, which is fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do definitely want that, but I do not want that sort of a thing to lead to pride or arrogance. And it that I mean, while it's fun, it's at the end it's vain. So the more important part is, what kind of a value does it really have? And that's what I want people to see first and foremost.
Well, thank you for saying that, Aram. Lastly, any final words of advice or encouragement for a young artist out there who's inspired by your work?
Well, it's Oh, I mean, that's actually quite the responsibility, I'd say. Um, I'd say, whatever it is you're passionate about, no matter what other people say, uh, simply if it fulfills you, if it enriches your soul, if it gives you joy, then keep at it. That's what I would say. Don't listen to the naysayers. First and foremost, of course, I mean it should be pleasing to God. Uh, that's the most important thing. But once you have that, and there is you have that peace, then you can just completely be fully invested. Um, but don't make any of it into an idol. That's something that unfortunately that a lot of artists might struggle with. So just simply see the opportunity and the possibility of being an artist and being able to illustrate as a great gift. And be proficient at it. Be very good at it. Practice as much as you can. Just be sure to have great consistency when it comes to that, and you will eventually see the fruits. And just simply, if there's one thing, if there's just simply one subject matter that you're passionate about, be fully invested in it. Don't worry what others may say. And unfortunately, uh, I'm saying this because I've had that sort of a pushback, especially from people from my age group, especially in school. That wasn't easy. But what it actually ended up doing was that it created an opposite reaction. And now thankfully, praise be to God, I have this vocation. So I just want to suggest very fervently that you just simply keep at it and be encouraged.
Well, thank you, Aram. You certainly have a very fascinating vocation. It's amazing. I'm very happy that I came across your photos, that I met you in Armenia, that I was able to see
Likewise.
your drawings, and I hope my students enjoy them. I know they will, and I think your drawings are very inspiring and the best I've seen in terms of dinosaurs. So you have quite the gift, and so thank you again, Aram. I really appreciate your time.
Well, deeply appreciate your time and for giving me this opportunity. It means a lot to me. So thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.